Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Regional Chamber's 2024 Economic Forecast Breakfast. I'm Jerry Ricciuti from WKBN and WYTV in Youngstown, a friend and partner of the Chamber, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us for this annual insightful event. I always warn people when I do these that as unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, we'll try to kind of muddle through this together. And if my voice at some point sounds a little froggy, please forgive me. I'm still doing a little election night jet lag from the other night. I've been telling people for months I couldn't wait until Thursday, and here we are. This morning we're going to hear about our regional and national economy from our most respected First National Bank forecaster, David Valentiner, as well as here at home in our local economy with an update from the Regional Chamber's fearless leader and President, CEO, Guy Coviello. We're going to present the 8th Annual Excellence in Manufacturing Award to a successful, nearly 100-year-old custom fabrication and roll metal solutions manufacturer in Youngstown that has been growing tremendously over the past few years. And we're going to honor a Brookfield native who's running the world-renowned Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado with our special Valley Champion Award. This is going to be a very exciting morning. Let's strap ourselves in and get started. I'd like to begin this morning introducing our head table. From your left, my right, we have Rick Organ, CEO of Heinz Industries, our Excellence in Manufacturing Award recipient. Michael O'Donnell, our Vice President of Operations at Magnet, the sponsor of our Excellence in Manufacturing Award. John Miles, the CEO of Steelite International, Economic Forecast VIP dinner sponsor, and the presenter of our Valley Champion Award. Jack Damioli, President and CEO of the Broadmoor Hotel and our Valley Champion Award recipient, and Guy Coviello, President and CEO of the Youngstown Warren Regional Chamber. David Valentiner, the Managing Director of Interest Rate Management at First National Bank and our forecaster this morning. And last but not least, Pete Asimilopoulos, Executive Vice President of Small Business Banking at First National Bank, our Gold Breakfast sponsor. Jumping right in this morning, we're pleased that once again this year, the Regional Chamber and Northeast Ohio's Manufacturing Advocacy and Growth Network, also known as Magnet, have come together to highlight a Valley manufacturer making significant strides in our community and the industry. At this time, I'd like to invite to the podium Magnet's Vice President of Operations, Michael O'Donnell, to introduce our 2024 award recipient.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to give a special thank you to the Chamber and Guy specifically and his team. We've had a great relationship being able to serve this community for many years going back with this chamber. So thank you so much. And secondly, it's always an honor to present an award anywhere, and especially here in the Valley. And this is very special to me, actually. I'm a little off script right now, but this particular, I didn't know this until I was told the awardee, but this particular awardee I've known for about 25 years, Rick Organ. And Rick, I met him when he was at Schneller and worked with him. That was an aerospace industry. He moved on through several other industries, went with some VC, and then I was meeting with him and we were able to serve him, and then he's come back to the Valley. He's come back to the Valley where you grew up, right? And he's done such immense, incredible work there at Heinz Industry, bringing it back to a level of proudness and increased jobs and performance. It's just unbelievable what him and his team have done. I've met his team, and it's just a great pleasure for me to personally introduce this award here today. So with that, we'd like to just share again, as was just mentioned, that we do hold this Excellence in Manufacturing Award honor to present each year. And it's a special focus on any products, new products or services that are brought to the community. And there's many excellent submissions we did receive this year, and the committee, as you know, did select Heinz Industries. We're especially proud to present this award to the custom roll fabricator, headquartered here in the Valley, which has 100 years of business since 2025. That's incredible, 100 years. How much has changed in roll forming and in metal forming in 100 years? It's just unbelievable. They're a recognized industry leader, serving diverse end markets, including material handling, trucks, trailers, solar appurtenances, and they employ more than 200 people across their 3 Midwest locations, and they have evolved significantly in headcount and technology. And it is my understanding that in the recent past years, you've installed a lot of new technology at your facility also. A great leader. The second facility in Ohio, one in Indiana, Heinz is one of the largest custom roll fabricators. They have invested almost $15 million recently in new, highly sophisticated, value-added fabrication equipment. And at Magnet, we believe there's 4 pillars to success and sustained success. One is innovation and technology. You just heard it there. 2 is leadership and of the organization at all levels. 3 is talent and taking care of your people. And 4 is innovation. They deepen their in-house engineering talent to ensure quality, reliability, world-class customer service, and they work tirelessly to build long-term relationships. Heinz leadership has invested and dedicated to its workforce, both at the senior level, middle management level, and hourly level, providing career paths that encourage and facilitate personal growth. They pay above market hourly rates and have open communication across the whole organization. In addition to many progressive techniques like quarterly town hall meetings with their staff, most always led at the highest level and by Rick himself, the president, the company also introduced a mobile app specific to more rapidly disseminate important information across all their stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very proud to invite you to turn your attention to the screens and learn more about Heinz Industries and our awardee.
I'm Rick Organ. I'm the CEO of Heinz Industries. Heinz Industries is a company that's been here in Youngstown for very nearly 100 years. Today, we are a producer of highly engineered metal fabricated parts made principally through roll forming. But in addition to that, we have a variety of other metal fabrication capabilities, including robotic welding, punching, brake pressing, and so forth. I think a number of things have led to Heinz being able to make it to 100 years. First and foremost is the people. We have been very fortunate throughout our history to have attracted among the very best people from within the community here. Certainly there are many companies comparable to ourselves throughout this country. I think what has benefited Heinz and contributed to our success is the way in which we care for and commit ourselves to meeting our customers' needs. It's a very rare occasion when Heinz ever loses a customer. Once we have secured you as a customer, we tend to have you for life. And that's because of the way we take the time to care for them, the level of service that we provide. I think we're unparalleled in this industry in service, delivery performance, quality performance, and importantly, we are very much involved with our customers at the very outset, helping them define better their needs and coming up with a solution that best suits their requirements, but at the same time is well suited to our manufacturing capabilities. This has been an exciting year for Heinz. I mean, it's our 100th year. We were just named a top workplace in manufacturing, and we were awarded this Excellence in Manufacturing. When we were first informed that we had won the award, we were thrilled. I want to not only thank, the Chamber and Magnet, but more importantly than that, I want to thank all our employees. Because, without their commitment, without their acceptance of what we're trying to do here and being part of that, we wouldn't win this award. It's all about our people, and it's all about, their contributions and commitment to this. So they deserve the biggest thanks of all.
So without further ado, thank you for the round of applause, and we'd like to present the Excellence in Manufacturing Award recipient on the behalf of Magnet and the Chamber to Heinz Industries and President Rick Organ. up. I think that this is a photo op. Thank you very much again for what you do in the Valley and the community and how you develop your employees and create jobs.
Thank you very
so
much. Thank you. You know, I was told it's not necessary for me to speak here today, but I couldn't miss an opportunity to do so. First off, I have to thank the Chamber, Magnet, for this recognition. As I indicated there, this is a true honor to recognize Heinz. You know, it has been my distinct pleasure, having grown up here in the Valley, having come to Heinz 8 years ago now, to have had the opportunity to lead this organization, to work with the people that I do each and every day, to honor the legacy that we inherited. That has been, you know, Heinz has been a visible and meaningful part of this community throughout its history. As a young boy growing up in this community, I certainly knew the Heinz name. I had an uncle, I had a cousin who worked there, many people that I grew up with. I always remember each of the people that I've met from Heinz throughout my lifetime were people that I had a great deal of respect for, people that I knew were pillars in this community, and we hope to continue that legacy throughout in the years ahead. We're building this company not for today, but for the future. And as I indicated, and as much as I am thankful to the Chamber and to Magnet for this honor, most importantly, I'm thankful to all the people that presently work for Heinz, and importantly, the people that came before us. So thank you all for this honor. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Rick and your entire team, congratulations once again, and for all your hard work and growth in the Valley, and we wish you ongoing success as you look forward to your next 100 years. To Michael and the folks at Magnet, thank you for your longtime partnership, for joining the Chamber and honoring the businesses each year, but also helping manufacturers throughout the Valley through all of the significant services the Magnet team provides. Speaking of support, the Chamber's grateful for all of the generosity offered by the sponsors that helped make today and the VIP activities held last evening very possible. We'll hear from our gold breakfast sponsor, First National Bank, in just a bit, but I want to recognize the additional sponsors of this Economic Forecast Breakfast. We want to thank our keynote sponsor, Humtown, the silver sponsors, Boak & Sons Commercial Metal Forming, which was our Excellence in Manufacturing Award recipient in 2021, and Dawn Incorporated. Our bronze sponsors, Platts Realty Group and Tata Steel. Our VIP dinner sponsors, DeSalvo Construction, Steel Light International, and Trumbull Industries. Our VIP reception sponsors, Number 1 Cochrane, AIM Transportation Solutions, Akron Children's Hospital, Mahoning Valley, Aqua, Cafaro Foundation, DeBartolo Corporation, Eagle Rental Purchase, Mercy Health, PI&I Motor Express, Valorec, and VEC. And last but certainly not least this morning, our dessert sponsor, Savs Max, which donated more than 600 of those delicious macarons on your tables for our enjoyment this morning. Can we please give an additional round of applause to our additional sponsors for their continued support of the Chamber efforts and events. With the Regional Chamber's signature events drawing crowds like this, and by the way, this is the largest crowd we've had for this event since it was established in 2008, with 400 people here this morning. The team felt compelled to partner with various nonprofit organizations once again for 2024, as they have in 2022, and ask our event attendees to donate items to worthy causes. For today's event, we focused on the needs of Akron Children's Hospital, Mahoning Valley. If you have children, grandchildren, nieces, or nephews, you know the significance of Akron Children's in our valley. The system ranked among the best children's hospitals in the country, but it's their compassionate approach to treatment that makes them truly exceptional. Throughout a combination of revolutionary treatments and extraordinary patient experiences, Akron Children's Care does more than heal. It brings the entire family together for emotional support and understanding across multiple locations. With so many of our youngest residents in their care, the hospital asked for donations of toys and pajamas, and as always, this crowd has not disappointed. Check out the photo that you're going to see on the screen of what's been collected. If you donated, you received a ticket this morning. We drew 4 of those tickets to win $25 gift cards to the Eastwood Mall. And if you're one of these people, excuse me, get my cheat sheet, you can stop out at the head table on your way out to pick your gift certificate. Patrick Lyons, Michelle Sisler, Allison Engstrom, and Joe Lukic. Thanks to all of those who donated, made their kind contributions and generosity. If you happen to have forgotten to bring an item or you weren't aware of that, we have another opportunity for you to contribute to this cause because we've invited our next award recipient to town to give him an award. He gave us something in return, a fabulous package that includes a 2-night stay and 4 rounds of golf at the famed Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado. We're going to be live auctioning that package off in just a bit, so get your wallets out and ready, because 100% of those proceeds will be given to Akron Children's Hospital. But first, let's meet this Valley native who attributes his success to his upbringing and never forgets where he came from. I'm pleased to ask John Miles, the CEO of Steelite International, which supplies an array of tableware, flatware, china, glass, buffet equipment, all to the Broadmoor, to introduce our Valley Champion Award recipient, Jack Danioli. John?
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Guy and the Chamber. Beautiful morning this morning. They brought us all together. Big hand for Guy in the Chamber. Thank you so much. I'm going to let Jack talk a little bit about his story, but we're from the hospitality industry, and people often ask me, what is the hospitality industry? And the employees that come to work for us, I say, it's a selfless dedication to giving others a good experience, right? And, think about that. Someone wakes up every day, and they spend their day trying to give others a terrific experience. And Jack exemplifies that. And I think beyond that, think about leading 2,100 people to get up every day and be inspired to do that. Absolutely incredible what he's done at the Broadmoor, at the Greenbrier, in his career. And it's a great honor to introduce him today. Jack.
Good morning, everybody. And truly, it is a pleasure to be back in the Valley. And I'd like to also echo the comments, Guy. Thank you. Thank Kim. I am truly honored to be here today. This valley means a lot to me, and I will never forget growing up in Brookfield and playing a lot of golf and also working at Yankee Run Golf Course. My first job was 10 years old. I was shagging golf balls for Ben McMullen, if anybody remembers Ben, the golf professional there, and went on to caddy and work at that golf course for about 12 years growing up. What I remember, though, is the work ethic, the dedication that the individuals in this valley have. And my dad did not have anything more than a 6th grade education. He was probably the smartest man I knew and know. And he is somebody that I always will look up to. He ended up with a distinguished military career. Went on to fly airplanes, become an instructor rating and flying airplanes, built houses in his spare time after working at GATX, where he worked for 42 years. The Valley has come together in a different way for me. There was a gentleman by the name of Steve Bartland from Hubbard. And Steve's father and my father worked at GATX for 42 years together in the same shop. And I didn't know Steve growing up, but he attended YSU and was a pretty good baseball pitcher. Made it to the minor leagues, and he worked at the Greenbrier for a short period of time. And when I was getting ready to graduate from college, I asked Steve's father, who would come to the house, if by chance I can get an introduction at the Greenbrier, because I wanted to be a golf professional. And Steve's father was nice enough to get Steve to write a letter of introduction, and that's how I got to the Greenbrier, and to work with Sam Snead and to work at that beautiful place. And coming from the Valley, I really didn't know places like the Greenbrier existed. And we were teasing last night, going out to dinner for a nice dinner for us was the Yankee Kitchen. And I still love the Yankee Kitchen. So it is something that this Valley means a great deal to me. Coming from this Valley means a great deal to me, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the career and other things. But I also want to take an opportunity to not only thank my mom and dad, who no longer are with us, but my wife of 39 years, Rachel, and who's with us today. And she's from Kent, Ohio. We met at Ohio University. And then the best tutor in English I've ever had, my sister, who assisted me when I was at Youngstown State. I wasn't the best student. So my sister, who assisted me greatly during those times. And so Deb, thank you very much. And John, thank you. I appreciate it very much, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Demoli, a guy dedicated to hospitality.
I believe we're going over to answer questions,
Okay.
if you don't mind. I have to turn it on first. I told you I'm not good at this. And I'm not very tall, so thankfully there's a little thing I can put my feet on here. You thanked your wife and your relatives there. Anybody else you want to introduce briefly?
I don't believe my brother, who is out in Colorado, I think a lot of you know Dale, who was involved with MVI for years before he retired. But Dale and his wife are out in Colorado, and they are enjoying retirement. And I think they're just too busy doing whatever they're doing to come out to the Valley for this. But anyways, Big Brother always beat me up on the golf course when I was growing up, so always appreciated that.
Beyond that nobody may have known before, anything else about you that nobody in this crowd might know?
Well, when I graduated from Ohio University, I did a 6-month internship with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And so this was during the Ted Stepien era, 1982. And the fun fact is, we talk about the value of ownership and solid ownership. And this was not the case during the 1982 Cavaliers, if you remember back to the day. And the NBA actually put in a rule called the Stepien rule, which they could not, a team cannot trade away all your first-round draft picks on washed-up players. So that was the Stepien rule that was put in 1982.
Who is Jack Demoli personally? What was it like beyond growing up and playing golf in the area? What was it like to grow up here?
Well, I think it was a perfect environment. Yankee Run really was not only the place that we played golf, we played football, we played basketball, we hiked, probably got into a little bit of trouble as well, but we'll leave that alone. But it's just, Brookfield was a wonderful place to grow up. And, when I meet our orientation classes, and I still meet every orientation class that I possibly can, of new employees joining the Broadmoor, I talk about growing up in Brookfield, where, you know, it was a small town environment. We had a red light, we had some corn, some cows, and this golf course. And that was the focal point. And the thing that I remember is that golf allowed an individual, regardless of age, to play with other individuals, regardless of skill levels, regardless of age. And it was a wonderful social environment. And I was playing with individuals that were 50, 60 years old in golf leagues, the Sharon Steel League. And I was a 14, 15-year-old kid. And, you know, it was a great socialization, a great learning experience of how to relate to people of all ages and backgrounds. And I think that is a lesson I took with me.
I grew up in Sharpsville. Yankee was one of the many courses people in the Shenango Valley often would use. What beyond that has stayed with you, and what, if any, obstacles you encountered growing up that you overcame to get to this point?
Well, again, not understanding that a Greenbrier even existed or a Broadmoor growing up. I think anytime we traveled as a family, we stayed at mom and pop motels. And if you think about in the 60s, Holiday Inn was probably about the nicest hotel that was out there as far as a chain. There was no Ritz-Carltons or Four Seasons or Montages or any of those. So I think just understanding a little bit of how the industry has changed and how exposure to golf in particular has led me down this path has been something that I will never forget.
Why and how, if we can get into that a little bit, the Broadmoor itself, it's internationally renowned. How has it, through the years, retained that status?
Well, this is the similarities of industry. And we talked a little bit last night about relationships. And we're in a relationship business, and we achieve what we achieve as a result of 2,100 people working together. I think there's a lot of similarities between sports and business. And if you think about team sports, everybody has an assigned role. Everybody has a job to do in order for the team to be successful. And that's no different than the hospitality industry, or quite frankly, probably any business. And at the Broadmoor, you know, we're the longest running 5-star, 5-diamond resort in the world. So in 1960, the first year we won our Forbes 5-star award, 1976, for the first year that the AAA made the distinction of 5 diamonds. And our team wins that every year. It's not me, it's not the management team, it's 2,100 people working together. And that teamwork, that we're a family, a large family, but we're a family, and we view ourselves that way. And it is something where, you know, when we go around, and I go around to the various parts of the operation, it's understanding Paul at the front door and what their families are doing, what their children are doing, what sports they enjoy. And those conversations, you know, the old adage of management by walking around. And that is something that I have been taught over the years, and many mentors. And no one ever achieves anything by themselves. There's been always a lot of people along the way that assist.
What have you brought in your time to the Broadmoor to improve that situation?
You know, one of the fun things has been when I joined the company in 2014, we started to build camps. So we've opened 3 boutique camps, so to speak. One called Cloud Camp, which sits 3,000 feet above the Broadmoor on the summit of Cheyenne Mountain. It's a 23-key little camp, Broadmoor quality food and service, and it's about a half an hour away up the mountain over 32 switchbacks that take you up to the top of the mountain, the summit of the mountain. The next one is called Emerald Valley Ranch, which is surrounded by the Pike National Forest of 220,000 acres of national forest land. We have an end holding of 100 acres in the middle of that. And this little ranch is an upscale dude ranch, horseback riding, fly fishing, hiking, needless to say. One thing, no beanies and weenies. It's Broadmoor quality food and service. And then the last one is called the Broadmoor Fly Fishing Camp. And it's an Orvis endorsed lodge on the Tarryall River, where we have 5 miles of private stream. This is only 7 keys, plus Broadmoor guests that can go up to fish for the day. But these little camps have just been so much fun to kind of birth, and we started those in 2014 with construction and opened them in late 2014 and 2015. Since then, we also have 3 attractions. And so we purchased what we call Seven Falls, which has been around since the 1800s as a paid-for attraction. And what it is a box-walled canyon with a beautiful restaurant that is at the base of the canyon at the end, about a mile up the canyon, where a 7-tier waterfall is. And it's just a gorgeous piece of property where, as a mile walk from the Broadmoor, you can be in 2,000 acres of beautiful forested land. Above the falls, we built a soaring adventure, which is zip lining. And so a series of zip lines there that range from 300 feet to 1,800 feet. Plus, if you think about Indiana Jones on those suspension bridges with the wood plank and the rope sides, we have 2 of those that are 200 feet long, and then a controlled rappel that brings you back down to the canyon floor. And then last but not least, you gave the hotel guy a mic, so I'm gonna talk. Last but not least, we rebuilt a railroad in 2020 during the pandemic, believe it or not. So we have the Pikes Peak Manitou Cog Railway, one of the 2 cog railways in the country that goes to the summit of Pikes Peak. It leaves from Manitou, a little town right beside Colorado Springs. But it is a beautiful way to go up the mountain to America's Mountain at 14,200 feet. And this railway has been around since the 1800s, and we decided in 2020 to rebuild it during the pandemic, and it was quite an undertaking.
I'm told that a stranger in this area, Jim Tressel, I hope, if he's here, I hope I pronounced his name right. He stayed at the Broadmoor. Name drop a few famous individuals who stayed there.
Well, of course, Jim and Eileen come out, and they have a daughter in New Mexico, so we see them on occasion. You know, over the years, presidents and various individuals have been out. If you think about between the Greenbrier and the Inn in Florida, where I was for a few years, and the Broadmoor, 4 presidents had the opportunity to meet and get to know really President Bush 41 quite well, and that family were absolutely wonderful. Bono from U2. Rachel has a picture with Bono and our girls when they were small, and then with the military community there. It is General Hyten. So if you're thinking about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he's a golf buddy and somebody that is just an honor that somebody dedicated their life to our country and the service that they provide.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Damioli. I had to come back up here. I forgot my cheat sheets. Moving on to our forecast. The Chamber's grateful this morning to have a longtime corporate sponsor and friend in First National Bank. The organization has stepped up continually and supported so many of the organization's initiatives and endeavors, and we certainly could not have pulled off an event like this morning without them. It's truly a pleasure now to introduce from First National Bank for remarks and introduction for our forecaster, Pete Asimakopoulos, the Executive Vice President of Small Business Banking.
Jerry can pronounce Tressel, but not Asimakopoulos. Well, good morning, everyone. Great to be with all of you this morning. As Jerry said, I'm Pete Asimakopoulos, Executive Vice President for Small Business Banking for First National Bank. I'm responsible for small business banking throughout our entire footprint, which does include Pennsylvania and Northeast Ohio. But on behalf of First National Bank and FNB Corporation, it is an honor to once again partner with the Regional Chamber in sponsoring the annual economic breakfast and to share some valuable insights on economic trends and activities. I'd also like to take a moment to congratulate both Jack and Rick for their awards this morning. Well-deserved. Great to have you both back in the Valley. This morning we're gathered to bring local business, civic, community-oriented organizations together to gain insights and collaborate with each other and proactively plan for the future of our region. Growth occurs anywhere in the Valley or Northeast Ohio, and it benefits everybody. We need to continue to be diligent in working together to promote such growth. Like many of you, I'm born and raised in the Valley and have been part of the business community for nearly 40 years. And I've had the privilege to work with some amazing leaders. And I am as optimistic as I've ever been about our future. I'm optimistic in part because of the collaborative spirit that exists between many of the organizations. They include the Chamber, the Port Authority, Eastgate, Lake to River, Magnet, Jobs Ohio, YBI, YSU, the cities of Youngstown and Warren, as well as our nonprofit and the big business community at large. The next generation of leaders are working tirelessly in partnering together with initiatives around site readiness efforts, repopulation, housing, workforce development, business attraction and expansion, and of course, education. With us maintaining these partnerships while focusing on the key initiatives that I mentioned, we are in a position to see economic growth in the future for this entire region. At First National Bank, our mission is to improve the quality of life for the communities that we serve. We do this by establishing relationships built on trust and integrity. As we approach another calendar year end and look forward into 2025, my colleagues and I look forward to working with you to explore ways to better serve each other and the communities we call home. On behalf of First National Bank, I want to thank Guy, Kim, and the entire Chamber staff for all they do to drive economic growth and for the opportunity to sponsor this morning's breakfast. I also want to thank the Cafaro family for providing a great venue and delicious breakfast. The Eastwood Complex is clearly one of our economic drivers and gems of the Valley. But most of all, I want to thank all of you for your commitment, your leadership, and your perseverance that has helped our Valley remain a strong, viable community. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce and welcome back an F&B colleague with more than 25 years financial experience and economic expertise, David Valentiner. If you've never heard David before, you're in for a real treat. David has a unique way of comparing our economic situation to people and to situations and people that we're all familiar with. David is FNB's Director of Interest Rate Management. He is responsible for overseeing FNB's interest rate risk management services for North and South Carolina. Prior to joining FNB in 2017, he was Director of Commodity Risk Management at Fifth Third Bank, Vice President of Capital Markets at Sovereign Bank in Philadelphia, and he's also served in different risk management and investment banking roles with Bank America in Charlotte, London, and New York. Please give a warm Valley welcome to my colleague and friend, David Valentiner.
No, I appreciate it. I was here 2 years ago, so I'm really excited to be back and kind of go through things. So today, it's tough. It's first of all, it's been a very busy week. Not only do we have a national election, we have the Federal Reserve meeting today. So there's a lot of new information that's kind of coming out. But today I'm going to try to talk a little bit about things that are more systemic long-term trends and how that relates to you in this community. So we're going to talk a little bit about the economy in general, and then we're going to focus in on a couple of specific issues like labor, like housing that really affect everyone. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start. It really comes back to COVID. We are still in many ways, an economy that has been driven by changes that started 4 years ago. And we're only now talking about this, quote, post-COVID economy. And what we mean by that is things are starting to return to normal from where they were. So if we look at that, we're going to start with the U.S. consumer. I always like to start with the consumer because they're 70% of all the spending that goes on in the country. Let's see here. There we go. All right, so the consumer, 70% of all spending. If we go back again to COVID, 4 years ago, what happened with the consumer was they were given a tremendous amount of stimulus, unlike anything we'd ever seen before. And if we look at what they did with that, they did three things. The first thing they did was, with that additional stimulus, whether it was stimulus checks, whether it was expanded unemployment, was they spent about 1/3 of it immediately. The second thing they did is they actually saved about 1/3 of it. And Kobe, I may need you to advance things. There we go. So I apologize that this may not go all the way back there. They saved about about 1/3 of what they had. And so the idea was, okay, we got this initial inflationary boom in spending, then they save some money. What happens when they start spending all that savings? Well, if you look at what they did, this is what savings looked like for the American consumer. You see a fairly steady straight line, and then what you're going to see is those large spikes. What the spikes are, those were stimulus checks coming in and consumers saving that. And so what economists said was, hey, as soon as they start spending all that, we're really going to see the economy jump. And if you look at that, you can see that money has been spent. It already was put into the economy, and the actual savings rate now is about 4.5%. That's historically low. Normally, the consumer saves about 7%. So once again, they spent about 1/3 of it, they saved about 1/3 of it, and they put it back into the market already. And then the last thing they did is they actually used about 1/3 of it to pay down credit card debt. Now, this again was important because if you pay down your debt, that means you can spend more in the future. And so economists said, wow, well, once they start to rack up credit card debt again, we're really going to see inflation take off. And that's exactly what happened. If you look at this graph, this just shows credit card. It's not the total amount of credit card debt, it's actually the increase or decrease. Also, anytime you see a graph that I have with that gray bar, that just designates a time of recession. So what we're looking at here is we had steady increases in credit card spending. During COVID, we saw a massive pay down in credit card debt, and then it rebounded. That was the kind of 1, 2, 3 punch to the inflationary environment and to the economy. But if you look at it, you can see that credit card spending is not growing as fast. This graph does not show that credit card debt is coming down. It just shows that it's no longer accelerating at the pace it was in the few years after COVID. And so what happened was all of this additional COVID spending, the savings going in, the savings that paid down credit card debt, which has now come off, it has really been a driver of the economy for the past couple of years. And this is unusual because, once again, it was driven by kind of, government spending to keep the economy bolstered during COVID. So if we look here, this shows the economic growth rate. So we've really had strong growth really since the middle of 2022, and then going into 2023, we actually had very strong growth. Again, all of that savings money was being put into the economy. All of that additional credit card growth was starting to come into the economy. And I think, I always say, if you really want to look at 2023, it's very easy to understand what was driving the economy. I have a 12-year-old daughter, so we all know that Taylor Swift was driving the economy. Now, what's interesting about Taylor Swift was in 2023, she did 53 shows in the United States, and it was estimated that her concerts brought an additional $4.3 billion into the economy that would not have been there. This is not just ticket sales and merchandise. This is restaurant sales in locations where she was. This is hotel sales. This is travel arrangements. This is the airline industry, right? So we saw this huge spending, and I like to say, I won't make anyone guess, but if you know what one of her tickets, the average ticket price was in 2023 for buying it on the secondary market, was $3,800 for a Taylor Swift ticket. $3,800. And what that tells me is, one, my daughter's not going to go but once a year. The second thing it tells me is that that's a consumer who has money to spend, okay? That's a strong consumer market. To put it in perspective, that was a 2,000% increase from her previous tour. That's a consumer that has money to spend. But then if you look at what began to happen this year, we saw things change. So this is the economic growth rate that started out in the first quarter of 2024. We dropped all the way down to less than 1.5%. And so the question was, what's happening? Is the consumer losing some of that steam? Have they kind of spent through all that pandemic money and we're beginning to move into a post-pandemic environment? And if you want to call 2023 the Eras Tour economy, I would say right now we're in what I call, an economy where people now are starting to see I won't call them excesses, but the relief they got during COVID being pulled away. And student loans is a great example of it. So in March of 2020, student loans were they were put in forbearance. The government, by the way, controls more than 90% of all the student loans, and they said, you don't have to pay. You don't have to pay on your student loans. The average student loan payment in the United States was around $390. Okay, about $390 was the average student loan payment. And when they said, hey, you no longer have to pay, that was only for a limited time. October of last year was when student loan payments had to start getting paid again. And so 2023 was this great economy, but then as the money began to run out, we also saw costs start to increase with things like student loans. The interesting thing about student loans is while last October was when you had to start paying them again, there was something put into the bill that said, however, if you're delinquent on student loans, you cannot be reported to your credit agencies until October of this year. So you still got a 1-year window when people who were delinquent didn't have to say that they were delinquent or get reported, which still allowed them to take on consumer debt. That goes away this October, last month. Again, we're seeing the consumer now face a little bit tougher headwind. And by the way, when we talk about student loans, I think a lot of us think of student loans to younger people. This is a distribution. Oh, can you go back one? This is a distribution of what student loans look like. If you look at the bottom of that, 20% of all the student loans are to people 50 years and older. Student loan debt and that impact on the consumer is not just something that affects young people, it really affects all ages in our country. It's the second largest amount of consumer debt other than mortgages. So as we've moved into this kind of 2024 economy, I've sometimes dubbed that the Starbucks economy. I'll let you advance the slide. Now, the reason that I used it as kind of a Starbucks economy is because, Starbucks, they got a new CEO this year. They had some difficult earnings at the beginning of the year, and they said the reason why was, if I can advance it, they said, we continue to feel the impact of a more cautious consumer, particularly with our more occasional consumer. So what does that actually mean? It means if you're somebody and you're just a true coffee addict and you go to Starbucks every day just to get your coffee, you're still going. That consumer is still showing up. However, if you're somebody and you end up going in to purchase one of these, that consumer is actually pulling back. Now, I think it's interesting to look at Starbucks' business model. We think of them as a coffee place, but somewhere between 65% and 75% of all their sales now are for cold drinks. They're not a hot coffee producer. This is where the margin is, and this is something called a caramel ribbon crunch frappuccino. I had to look that up. That consumer who goes in, say, once a week with their friends and they all buy one of these drinks, they've started to pull back. In other words, we're seeing that consumer say, we have to be a little more cautious with our money. We have to pull back. And by the way, just one thing I learned when I was doing this, you know that Frappuccino is just a made-up word, right? Like it's not actually a real word. I thought it was a real drink because you have all these great European drinks like a macchiato and a cappuccino, but Frappuccino is made up. Starbucks owns a trademark. Nobody else can call anything a drink. But what they did then, if you're a big coffee drinker, is they released this year, The earliest ever. This is their pumpkin spice latte. This is one of their flagship drinks, okay? Now here's what's important. They released it this year in August. This was the earliest they ever released this drink. Why did they do it? Because they see about a 10% increase in sales when they do it. And they are trying to bring that consumer that spent all their money last year on Taylor Swift tickets back into the stores. So we're seeing a consumer that just doesn't have quite as much purchasing power as they did a year ago. And speaking of purchasing power, when this drink came out, by the way, it's kind of a fun story. I always am interested in how businesses do things. They originally came up with this drink about 20 years ago. And they said they had a bunch of test groups, and they said, what about, a fall drink or a pumpkin spice drink? And every single person in every test group said, we don't want it. It'll be awful. And so they have something called the Liquid Lab, and they just they literally went to the grocery store, bought pumpkin pies, came in and poured espresso over it and made people eat it, and everybody was like, you got to turn this into a drink. So that's how this came about. But 20 years ago, this drink cost you about $3.30. Today, it's about $6.50. Which when you pay that 20% tip they're going to punch you for and the 7 or plus % sales tax, it's an $8 drink. The consumer is backing off this level of spending, okay? So we're going to advance one. So this is what the economy then has looked like the rest of the year. We saw the consumer back off and everybody said, this is the downturn we've been waiting for. We thought this was coming. The Federal Reserve raised rates. And then the last 2 quarters of this year have been really good again. It's become a very difficult economy for us to forecast because as soon as we start to see things weaken and we see businesses, consumer businesses like Starbucks weaken, it turns around the next couple of quarters and we end up with a strong economy again. All right, so let's talk a little bit about inflation. Inflation has been the single largest issue that came out of the pandemic because we didn't deal with it for 40 years, and it's what groups like the Federal Reserve have been trying to combat. This chart just shows you what inflation has looked like over the past few years. Now, the one that you see that's kind of in yellow there, that's when I was here 2 years ago. That's where we were on the inflation curve. So 2 years ago when I was here, we were still in the middle of fighting the highest inflation we had had in 40 years. Inflation had reached 9%, and it was priority number one. If you look at what's happened since then, we did have a very nice drop in inflation. And you can see that little box there that shows March of 2022. That's when the Federal Reserve first started cutting interest rates. Now, if you look at the next one, this is where the Federal Reserve stopped cutting interest rates in July of 2023. They assumed inflation was going to continue to fall. It had been on a very rapid trend. We went from 9% to 3% in 12 months. But then it flatlined. It completely flatlined, and that is why the Federal Reserve left rates as high as they did for so long, for over a year. And then you see in September of this year, they started to cut again, and that's because we finally have started to see inflation fall. So we had this stagnation of inflation. The good news is it's finally starting to make progress again, and because of that, the Federal Reserve is finally starting to cut things. Let's see here. I'm going to take that inflation graph, though. I'm going to break it down. This is the exact same graph. We've just shortened it to put it on a different scale, and I want to overlay used cars and trucks. What I would do when we look at inflation is to always remember there are certain things that are driving inflation at any one period of time. The Federal Reserve initially said inflation was transitory. They've gotten in a lot of trouble for that because it stayed around a lot longer, but this is why they were doing it. It was things like used cars and trucks, which surged in the early days of the pandemic, but since then have actually normalized and even come down a little bit in price. And I want to show one other thing in this graph, which is lodging and hotels. This very much followed the wave in spending of the pandemic. Hotel prices were very depressed in the first year because nobody was traveling. They spiked the second and third year after, and then once again, they have normalized as well. So when we think about inflation, some of inflation really was transitory. The Federal Reserve was right about certain parts of it. And so let's talk a little bit about where I think the Federal Reserve got it right, and then we're going to talk about where they got it wrong. Let's go to the next one. Before that, I do want to talk one bit about used cars because I think this point is interesting. So used and new cars. In the United States last year, according to Kelley Blue Book, we hit the highest price for the average new car. The average monthly payment for a new car had been about $400 roughly for 10 years. Last year it spiked to $777, okay? Average price, average monthly payment for a new car. But here's what's interesting about that number. Some of that was due to prices being higher, some of that was due to interest rates shooting up. But what we really saw was, remember I said that if you looked at what happened with student debt, the average person with student debt was paying $390 a month. Those payments were put in forbearance for several years. At that same moment, we saw the average cost of a new car on a monthly payment jump about $380. I'm not saying people just took the money that they had been putting to their loans and used it for an additional car payment, but those numbers line up exactly. And again, student loan payments are back, that car payment is still here, and that's putting additional pressure on the consumer. This is a picture really of the supply chain crisis that we had a few years ago. 2 years ago when I was here, we talked a lot about this. This was one of the primary drivers of inflation in the early days, was the fact that we bought a lot of goods, we could not get them over to the United States fast enough, to the point where we had ships like this sitting off the coast of California. This is a picture off the coast of Los Angeles. At its peak, we had over 100 ships like this sitting off the coast. Today, we probably have one. And what that has done is we've seen the impacts of inflation related to supply chain come down. This is a graph here of durable goods. This mimics that supply chain crisis exactly. You can see we had very flat, relatively no inflation in goods for a decade. The pandemic hits, it spikes, and that's because we shifted our spending during the pandemic to more goods. We couldn't get them here fast enough. We ended up with a supply chain crisis. The good news is that again has gone away. This is again where the Fed was correct in saying that a lot of inflation was transitory. It was driven by short-term pandemic spending. However, if I pull up the second part of this graph, inflation is not just goods, it's also things like services. And if we look at what services did, you can see they rose much slower, they haven't come down. And the reason why is services are much more related to the labor market. So if we shift over to the labor market, this is Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. Back in February 2023, so almost 2 years ago, he said we may be beyond maximum employment. In other words, the labor market is so tight, we have so many people working, it's almost too much for our economy to handle, and that's going to raise prices. And the reason it's going to raise prices is because we saw the reemergence of pricing pressure from labor in a way we haven't seen really in a generation. Wages were growing about 2 to 3%. That's a normal economy, somewhere between 1 and 3%. That kind of wage growth is low enough that businesses usually don't have to raise their prices. Once wages started growing 4%, 5%, 6% a year, that becomes very difficult for businesses not to begin to raise prices. And what we saw was the reemergence of organized labor able to sign new contracts. One of the most notable ones was the UAW. They got a 25% increase over a few years. We saw the UPS drivers get a 10% increase in 1 year. We saw railway workers get a 24% increase over 4 years to 6 years. And then last, the big one that's been in the news, we saw the International Longshoremen's Association negotiate around a 62% increase. Again, it will phase in over a few years. But remember, these are contracts where we've seen these increases. This isn't a one-time thing. This will phase in over the next few years. And unlike prices for, say, cars or goods, once wages and labor go up, you can't really take them back down. You can't say, I know you got a 3% raise or a 10% raise last year. This year we're going to lower your pay by 3%. It usually doesn't work that way with labor. So once labor kind of starts to rise, that's when we see inflation get kind of endemic and it starts to establish itself in a society. All right, so here's the employment level. If you look at the employment level, you can see first, I'm going to put a little line here. This shows that it took us about 6 years to get back to the same employment level after the last financial crisis. If you look at it this time around for the pandemic, we got back much faster, so that was the good news. The bad news was it's kind of started to flatline below the rate, which is that red dotted line that we should have been on. So the challenge is we're about 5 million workers short in our economy. Where did they go? The answer is they started to retire. The Federal Reserve looked at it and said the biggest change that we've seen in the labor market is actually excess retirements. Normally the baby boomer generation was retiring at about 1.5 million people a year. During the pandemic, they started retiring at over 3 million people per year. That's an extra 1.5 million people every year retiring that we as economists were not expecting to happen. And imagine if you're a business, you're using your most tenured, your most experienced people, and that's happening at 1.5 to 2 million people every year until you end up with a 5 million labor force gap. All right, so let's look a little bit at how that breaks out. This is the labor force participation rate for different groups within the U.S. economy. This is the general labor force. What that's showing you is indexed to pre-pandemic, the general labor force, people of age to work, it's about flat. We're about at the same level we were pre-pandemic. But if I look at what's called the prime labor force, these are people 25 to 54. This is your prime working age. They've actually come back. We have more of those people participating in the economy than we did previously. That's the good news. The bad news is if you look at people 55 and older, they left the economy and they essentially never came back. And if you look at people 65 and older, it's an even starker story. Because if you're 65 or older and you retire, the likelihood that you will get pulled back into the economy is much less, especially several years later. So then the question is, okay, well, we knew that this was going to happen. We knew that baby boomers at some point were going to retire. So we do have a younger generation filling those gaps, right? Well, that's where some of the challenge comes in. So let's take a look at fertility rates across different generations in the United States. This is the end of World War II. The fertility rate was just below 3 children per family. If we look at the beginning of the baby boom generation, that starts in 1946. It peaks around 1957 at almost 4 children per family, and then you can see it starts to drop off. But for almost 20 years, I'm sorry, can you take that back one? You can see that for almost 20 years, we had a birth rate in this country of over 3 children per family. That's the baby boom, and it ended in 1965 when the number of children per family dropped below 3 for the first time since the end of World War II. Now, the next generation is my generation, if you want to hit that. That's Generation X. Clearly, I was a horrible child as our parents' generations had much fewer kids than the baby boomer generation. But you can see it drop, the fertility rate drop precipitously during just the next 15 or so years, where it went from over 3 in the baby boom to less than 2 during my generation of Generation X. Now, the millennial generation is next, if you'll hit that. This is the good news for the United States. The millennial generation was the good news because we are one of the few countries where we actually saw the birth rate begin to rise close to the replacement rate. So you need about 2.1 children per family to maintain a level population, assuming no immigration or migration in or out. So the millennials were the strong point, but if you'll advance one, you'll see when we move to Generation Z and then especially into Generation Alpha now, that birth rate again began to drop. And today we sit at about 1.6, 1.7 children per family. This is the lowest birth rate the United States has ever had since they started keeping records in 1930. It's going to be very difficult to replace that baby boom generation when you look at the demographics of the existing generation. All right, how do we compare with the rest of the world? Here's where we are, here's where the rest of the developed world is, and you can see that we're not alone. In fact, in many ways, we're actually doing better. We're still close to 2, where some are now falling even below 1. And so I want to speak really quickly about South Korea. I'm just going to advance there. South Korea saw an amazing transformation since the Korean War. In 1950, They had a birth rate of around 6 children. They doubled their population from 1950 to 1985. They hosted the Olympics in Seoul in 1988. It was a tremendous boom. The challenge when you see strong economic development in a lot of countries is those countries urbanize, and as countries urbanize, the more urban they get, usually the birth rate goes down to the point where now they have about 0.8 children per year in South Korea. In fact, I'm going to advance one here. Last year, they only hired half as many teachers as they hired 10 years prior. This year, there were 150 schools in South Korea that had no new children start. There were no new first graders because there were no children. The birth rate was so low. So the developed world is struggling a little bit with trying to find workers to replace the older generations which are retiring. All right, so how about this? Will people move though for jobs, right? You know, we know we still have that generation. Are people willing to move for jobs? What we're finding here is that if you look at the data, the number of people surveyed who said that they would move a location primary for the job started at about 30% a generation ago, and last quarter was at a low of around 1%. Now, it has gotten a little better the last 2 quarters, but what we're seeing is we are seeing a change in how people are looking at that job market, and they're not just saying right now, in terms of people moving, that yes, we'll easily move just because of work. And that's really because of things like different areas people are migrating in the United States. This is a map, a kind of a heat map of the U.S. that shows how people are actually moving. You can see in red that states like California and New York, they've had the largest population losses, and that states like Texas and Florida have had the largest population gains. In fact, if you look at 2022, if you can advance for me one, in 2022, of all the people who migrated within the United States, 93% only went to 4 states: Texas, Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia. Now this has started to slow, but we have seen a change in how people are migrating around the United States since the pandemic. Now, if we want to get data on why people are moving, some of the best data actually comes from United Van Lines, because they're moving people all over the country and they keep track of why people say they're moving. This is Ohio. The biggest change that we've seen is that things like retirement, this is the baby boomer generation retiring, things like retirement are one of the biggest drivers for people who are changing states and where they live. You see retirement here, you see lifestyle. This is not to say, if you look right below it, you see jobs. Jobs are still the primary driver, but the biggest discrepancies many times right now between states are people choosing retirement location and choosing lifestyle, which are really kind of the same thing. I'm going to add in Pennsylvania here. You can see they should have the same thing. You're going to see it's being driven, outbound people, by retirement and by lifestyle. I'm going to advance one more. This brings New Jersey in. New Jersey has probably seen the largest change in their population. Again, look at outbound and look at retirement. And now I'm going to add South Carolina. This is a state where we've seen a lot of people move into. They are going to be the mirror image of states like New Jersey, where you're going to see retirement and lifestyle driving people moving into the states. Now, here's what's interesting about this point. People are looking at this data going, wow, people are moving out of the Northeast. It's changing. It's not just jobs. It's important to realize that this is because of the baby boomer generation hitting that retirement age. The youngest baby boomers this year are 60 years of age. The pandemic brought the baby boomers right at their peak retirement age, and it's accelerated their retirement. It's starting to change the demographics of the United States, but this is not something that's going to last forever. This is really something that's being driven by that baby boomer generation. Job growth, good jobs, affordability, those are the long-term trends that still drive areas and drive growth in areas. So let's talk a little bit about housing. You can't talk about moving without housing. We talked a little bit about inflation, and remember I said first, let's see, we've got Durable goods, that was the supply chain crisis. Then we talked a little bit about services, if you can put that up. That's the labor issue. Now put up the next one. That's going to be shelter and housing costs. That's your last piece of the inflation puzzle. And again, you can see housing costs have risen, but they've stayed high. This is, again, a part of the inflation equation that is not transitory. Why is it high? Let's look first at prices. Oh, can you go back one? There we go. This is housing increases, not the absolute level of housing. This is housing increases. You see that large drop during 2008? That was the financial crisis. But we had an enormous spike again after COVID. This was driven specifically by what was going on at COVID. So why was this the case? If you can advance for me. Let's talk demographics one more time. This is the age distribution of the United States. This is everybody who's 1 year old and 2 year old and 3, all the way to people who are 100 years and older. You can obviously see it drop off as we get into older age. That yellow section, that is your millennial generation. That is the millennial generation. And here's what was going on. This is data from 2020. First, if you can advance me one, the median age for people moving out of their house is 26. That's what it was in 2020, right in the peak of that millennial group. Click to the next one. The median age for people having their first child in the United States in 2020 was around 27. And move forward one more. The median age when someone buys their first house 4 years ago was 34 years of age. That millennial generation, which is the largest generation in the workforce right now, right in 2020 at the height of the pandemic, they were hitting exactly the time when they all want to go and buy a house. And then if you advance one, we had this issue of working from home. Prior to the pandemic, 7% of people who could work from home worked from home. During the pandemic, 55% worked from home. What does that do? That took about 2 million people who could not afford a house where they worked and lived, who said, now wait a minute, if I can move out into the suburbs or move to a new location, I can afford a house. That brings 2 million new home buyers into the market who previously weren't there just because of work from home. And if you advance one more, and then we had incredibly low interest rates. The Federal Reserve takes interest rates near zero. What does that do? This shows the distribution of mortgages in this country. Most of them, as you see, are below 3%. In fact, if you advance one, 2/3 of all the mortgages in this country are below 4%. So we had incredibly low mortgages. We had a demographic generation that was ready to make a move. We had work from home, and it really began to spur prices. You can move one more. This is just to show you that today, this is about where mortgage rates are. This is why it's so unaffordable in many locations to try to buy a home, because everybody else locked in at half the rate that you'd be looking at today. All right, so this is the housing stock. This is also why it's become really difficult to afford a home. If you'll advance one, you'll just see that what we've got here is that huge drop. This is the number of homes under construction. We were growing that housing stock very well. It dropped precipitously during 2008, and we've never recovered. We were talking about the post-COVID economy. We're still actually paying for the sins of 2008 in terms of our housing stock. If you were to look at it, we are constructing right now in this country the same number of homes we were constructing in 1995. And the problem with that is that the population was only 265 million in 1995, and today it's about 335 million. So that's about 75 million new people, and we're still building the same number of homes. Home availability is still struggling. And if you'll advance one more, the reason is because after those huge losses in 2008, the amount of dollars, and you can advance, you'll see that the dollars never came back. Construction spending never got where it was until we got past the pandemic. So advance one more. This is kind of the last slide here. We're going to kind of wrap things up of the housing part. This is showing housing affordability. Now, you'll see in all of my presentations, we talk about median. I'm going to kind of talk just a little bit about math, why I'm not saying average, is that if I were to take, the problem with averages is that it lets large numbers rule the data. So for example, I'm going to just make up a number. If I said everyone on average in this room had a net worth of $100,000, and then Bill Gates walked in here, I would say, well, now the average person in here is worth $100 million. That is not very descriptive of the group. So when we talk about these numbers, what we say with median is we say just whatever's in the middle, we're getting rid of those outliers. If we look at the median income to housing cost in this country right now, and you can advance one, the way that everybody looks at it is they say, we look at what your monthly payment would be for a whole year versus your income. If that's above 30%, it's considered an unaffordable market. Housing is considered unaffordable. If it's below 30%, housing is considered affordable. The country on average has been right about at that affordability line for 10 years, and then it spiked after COVID. In some of those areas like Texas, Florida, I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, we were well below on the affordability line, and we saw a massive spike. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have bought into my house 20 years ago. I could never afford to live in Charlotte where I live now because affordability has spiked. What's really interesting is that we actually have data on your area here in Youngstown, Warren, and you can advance one. This is affordability in Youngstown, Warren. You are still a community that has an affordable housing market. Now, it is rising, and it did rise after COVID as it did everywhere else. But I think the good news for the community here is that you are one of the few communities that really does have both a vibrant business community and you still have an affordable market in terms of housing. Most areas don't have that. And if I were to show you something crazy like the Los Angeles market, I couldn't even put it on that chart. It actually wouldn't even fit in this room because it's about 90% of your income. The average house monthly payment costs 90% of what the average person makes out there. You're in a very good area. I want to make sure you realize what a great area you're able to be in given what's going on in the housing market. All right, so you can advance to the next slide. I'm going to leave you with two kind of final thoughts. The first is the Federal Reserve meets today. We expect that they will probably raise rates 25 basis points. We'll see. There's a lot going on this week. That's the expectation. But if you look at what the Federal Reserve's been doing, the last meeting, Fed Chairman said the U.S. economy is in a good place and our decision is to keep it there. I think it's very important. Most economists who get up and talk, it's all gloom and doom. They're only showing you all the bad things that are happening. We've raised rates the fastest in 40 years, and we've not gone into a recession. That's amazing. That shows a lot of strength in the business community that we haven't gone into a recession. I think the Federal Reserve is working very hard to make sure that we don't, and this is probably one of the few times we've been able to raise rates like we have, or I actually think we have a very good shot at having a soft landing because the economy has stayed so strong through the past several years. So what are we looking at? Like if we look forward, kind of what am I looking at? If you advance to the next slide. This is the unemployment rate. And if you advance one more, the fear earlier this year was that we saw unemployment rates begin to rise to levels we hadn't seen since we were coming out of the pandemic. And if you advance one more, this whole area this year, we had 6 months of rising unemployment. This is bad news. You do not want to see unemployment starting to spike because usually when it does, it means you're going into a recession if you're not already in one. This is why the Federal Reserve came out and they cut rates 50 basis points 2 months ago. If you look at where we are now, and you can advance one, you can see that for the last couple of months, again, we've had unemployment falling. It's really been a surprisingly strong economy. Most economists have gotten this wrong. They've been predicting recessions for the past few years, but the economy has remained strong. So I'm going to finish with closing remarks, which is there is a lot of change going on right now that's still very specific to the pandemic. A big one is this driver of where people are moving out of and where they're moving into out of the Northeast into the Southeast. I think this has a lot of communities concerned that this is going to continue and there's a constant drain, but a lot of it is being driven by retirements. And as the baby boomer generation finishes that kind of retirement push, we should see things normalize again. So I always want to make sure that communities don't forget the primary driver of their community is still going to be the business community. It's why events like this are important. It's why the chamber is important, because that provides wages it provides tax revenue, and then that is what allows those lifestyle factors, such as downtown revitalization. Those things are becoming important to a younger generation, so it's important to keep that business community vibrant as it provides that foundation for it, especially once this kind of retirement boom moves on. So with that, thank you for having me. It's great to be back.
David, thank you so much for bringing these complex issues down to levels even I can understand. And my daughter and her husband are among the 93% that have moved to the Charlotte area. They now live in Concord. And you brought it all down to a level we can understand while also bringing in Taylor Swift references. And my youngest daughter, probably on sight, would recognize what Frappuccino that was because she loves to go to Starbucks. I flipped the script, and I told you when we started this morning I was still a little election lagged. We want to call on Chris Roman from George Roman Auctioneers because we have a vacation and golf package to auction off. So prepare yourselves for that. Chris, can you join us for the auction?
Thank you very much. Actually, if Jack, would you like to do a quick little explanation of the package that we're going to auction here this morning?
Absolutely. So we have a two-night stay at the Broadmoor in a suite with service charge, taxes, 2 rounds of golf on the West Golf Course, and 2 rounds of golf on the East Golf Course where the 2025 U.S. Senior Open will be played. It'll be our 9th championship at the Broadmoor. So that's what we're auctioning off.
All right, fantastic. So yes, that is, and again, all the proceeds from auctioning this wonderful package are going to go to the Akron Children's Hospital. But before we get the auction started, I do need to do one little thing. I'm a little off schedule here today, as Jerry said, kind of with that. I missed my exercise routine, so we're going to do a quick little exercise to get everybody going this morning. Everybody could put up their right hand real fast. Put your right hand up, okay? Put your left hand up. Everybody nod your head yes. That's the best auction exercise you can get. You're all primed, you're all ready to go for the auction. So now I expect everybody to make sure they bid at least one time. And the faster that we bid and the more money that we raise, the faster we'll get you out of here to go back to your regular jobs. So let's get started with the auction. Again, it's a great package. It's a 2-night stay. You have the 4 rounds of golf, which usually doesn't come with most of these packages. So thanks to Jack and the Broadmoor for donating this. How much, ladies and gentlemen, on the Broadmoor package? Again, all going to Akron Children's Hospital from the proceeds. He'll get $5,000 in the package. Give $5,000, $5,000. He'll get $4,000 to get us started off. Give $4,000. He'll get $3,000 on the wonderful package out at the Broadmoor. Where do you want to go? Who'll give $1,000 on that awesome package? $1,000. $3,000? $3,000 is offered, and now $3,500. $3,500, $3,000 is offered to get $3,500. $3,500 on the wonderful Broadmoor package. $3,500, $3,000 offered. I know there's a lot of regular auction people. I do a lot of these events, and I know a lot of faces, so let's get your hands up and do that exercise. $3,500 is offered, thank you, ma'am, and now $4,000. And now $4,000. And now $4,000 on stage, thank you, and now $4,500. And now $4,500. $4,500 is offered, and now $5,000. And now $5,000. Nothing like a little pressure of being right on stage and having to put your hand back up in the air there. $5,000 is offered, and now $5,500. That's right. Give them a round of applause. They're doing a great job. $5,500. $5,000 is offered, and $5,500 for it. $5,000 and $5,500 is offered, and now $6,000. And now $6,000. $5,500 is offered. I give $6,000. And now $6,000. Jack, give him a quick nudge, real fast. Just give him an elbow. Give him an elbow. $6,000, $5,500, and $6,000. Anybody for that awesome package there? $6,000 is offered. Thank you. And now $6,500. And now $6,500. $6,000 is offered. I guess $6,500 is offered. Thank you so much. And now $7,000. And now $7,000. $6,500 is offered, and $7,000. Did I think I read in the notes somewhere that Jack might be willing to join you for a drink or two while you're there, while you happen to be in town? So you have an extra special occasion after your golf or before the golf right there. $7,000, $6,500, and $7,000 for that awesome package. Anybody else for $6,500, $7,000?
We've got an announcement.
We've got an announcement.
We're going to do a second package.
All right, we're going to stop right there. We're going to sell the first package right over here for $6,500 to the young lady right down there, and we'll give you the other package for $6,500 as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. $13,000 for the Akron Children's Hospital. And is Paul here? Paul, you want to come up for 1 second real fast? That's $13,000 the Akron Children's Hospital, ladies and gentlemen.
Great. Thank you all very much. Everything you've done for us is the reason why we can help take care of kids in the Valley. The pajamas you brought in, the toys you brought in, the financial donations, all go to the kids here in the Valley. So thank you so much. Jack, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you so much to our buyers. Congratulations. We hope you enjoy. Please make sure you stop up afterwards so we can get your information. Jerry, back to you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for participating in that. Finally, this morning, we're going to round out our program with hearing on the local economy. But first, you may have noticed there's a little slip on your table. This evening, CEO Guy Coviello is going to be guest bartending at the R46 restaurant in Canfield to raise funds for Women United, which is a United Way of Youngstown and Mahoning County initiative. There is info, as I said, on your tables where the attendees can donate to Guy's tip jar and help him take the lead before the event even starts this evening. Last year at this very event, the Youngstown Warren Regional Chamber's president and CEO shared some interesting and positive statistics and some very good news about our region, and what has transpired since then is pretty astounding. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now hear and learn from CEO Guy Coviello.
Thank you, everybody. I've been following Valentiner for a few different years now, and my forecast is always more accurate. But I cheat. So I forecast what's next for the regional chamber, and it helps that sometimes the staff lets me know what that is. So before doing that, though, I want to take a look back. 3.5 years ago, we made a decision. We were no longer going to thump our chest as the self-declared leader of economic development in the Mahoning Valley. Economic development, after all, is not an organization's responsibility. We said at that time it is a community responsibility. During our 2021 annual meeting, we asked many people in attendance to stand up. They were representatives of the Western Reserve Port Authority, the Eastgate Council of Governments, Valley Economic Development Partners, Youngstown Business Incubator, Bright Energy Innovators, the Youngstown Foundation, and the chamber-founded Eastern Ohio Military Affairs Commission. We told everyone in attendance, this is your economic development team. And Pete, thank you for recognizing the collaboration. Someone smarter than me about this stuff once told me, and I wholeheartedly believe this, economic development is the ultimate team sport. And over the past year, our team got stronger. That's because the Mahoning County Commissioners joined the team when they approved Valley Vision, a joint economic development strategic plan created with the help of Ernst & Young. Trumbull County Commissioners joined the team a month later. And I want to recognize in attendance the newest teammate, Mahoning County Commissioner-elect in the back of the room, Gino DeFabio. And Gino, unlike Donald Trump, I am not going to draw attention to your weight. Then we added another teammate, Lake to River Economic Development, the 7th and final Jobs Ohio partner. And then most recently, we added Goodwill Industries, which will be a formidable teammate, helping us move thousands of marginalized individuals off the sidelines and into the workforce. Because of this team, the Valley is growing. According to United Nations projections, our population will grow every year through 2030. And because of this team, and even though we have growing jobs at the Youngstown Air Reserve Station, which is a government facility, for the first time in many, many years, a private, for-profit, corporate tax-paying company is now the largest employer in Trumbull County. Altium Cells has surpassed yards by hundreds. Now my forecast, which is really more like a political candidate giving a speech saying, I promised this, I promised that, I promised the other thing. Along with our partners, we will make several announcements over the next few months. We will announce a comprehensive housing strategy with the goal of pumping more than $100 million into the local economy. We will announce multiple programs to cultivate the next generation of corporate leaders to help us overcome challenges presented by a wave of retiring baby boomer CEOs that exist throughout the Valley. We will unveil trade opportunities with Vietnam and Iceland, facilitated by the Chambers of Commerce in those countries and Youngstown State University's Export Assistance Office, to grow our exports by 2% by 2030, which would result in another $500 million pumped into the local economy. We will use our newly created Business Advisory Council of the Fed to make sure conditions in the Mahoning and Shenango Valleys are given weight when creating monetary policies. And we will partner closer than ever with our state-elected delegation, some of whom have been in attendance this morning, and with whom we have already forged a strong working relationship to develop economic policies favorable for the Mahoning Valley. We are able to do this because of you. We have a record attendance for our annual breakfast. We have a record number of sponsors for this event. We continue to grow the number of corporate banners that you will see throughout this room and in the hallways, our partner-level members that provide the greatest financial assistance for our organization. Your unwavering support enables us to move the Valley forward. I thank all of you for that. I thank the Regional Chamber Board of Directors for trusting me, a mere journalist by trade, with the stewardship of this very important organization. So with all of that, please have a wonderful day and accept my appreciation for everything you do. Thank you.